Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, John, for that beautiful and rousing piping. Today is an important day for India, Gandhi Jayanti, the birthday of Mahatma Gandhi. Today is also an important day for the University of Edinburgh, where we are all gathered here to celebrate the first India Day. I want to thank you all for being part of this celebration. As you know, we are very fortunate to have Mr. Gopalkrishna Gandhi, Mahatma's grandson, to grace this important occasion. May I now invite the Principal and Vice Chancellor of the University of Edinburgh, Professor Sir Timothy O'Shea, to welcome you to the university and to the India Day celebration. Principal.
Minister, Mr. Gandhi, students, colleagues, guests, just a tremendous pleasure to be here to welcome you. It's really good to see so many people here to celebrate the university's very first India Day. Our university is truly international, founded in 1583, but from the outset recruiting both students and staff from other countries. We're tremendously proud that international students now make up more than 40% of our student population, and the definition of international I'm using is the old one, that is students from outside the United Kingdom. And we have more than 140 countries represented in the staff, student and alumni communities here, and electronically we reach more than 200 countries. We are very proud of our well-established partnership with India. We honoured our first Indian graduate nearly 140 years ago, and we host one of the UK's leading centres for scholarly excellence on South Asia. Our Indian alumni include Prafulla Chandra Ray, founder of India's first chemical company, Kadambini Ganguly, the first female Indian doctor, Freni Kamei, the first recipient of the Tata Endowment, Aurel Kapoor, the famous Indian psychiatrist, and Armin Joxi, a former vice president of the World Bank. And a particular association that we have been very aware of in recent months is our relationship to Indian physics, because obviously we were delighted when Peter Higgs got the Nobel Prize for the Higgs boson. But one of the very important things we did was to actually, in India, have a celebration of the work of both Bose and Higgs, because it is this very important particle is named after two people, a Scottish-based physicist and a physicist from the subcontinent. Today we have over 1,000 alumni living in India, and of course this engagement is not one way, with many Indian students visiting here, and they make a big impression on the city. On his visit to Edinburgh in India in 1842, the campaigner against slavery, Dwarkanath Tagore, was awarded freedom of the city and granted an audience with the Queen at Holyrood Palace. During the latter half of the 19th century, there was a great influx of Indian students coming here, and we were the leading university for such students with, in 1875, the Indian Association, the first South Asian student association in the United Kingdom, very progressive, campaigning on the abolition of capital punishment, and one of the first Edinburgh University societies to allow women into membership. The tradition of partnership with India continues apace. I'm very proud of the more than 100 ongoing collaborations. We have a wonderful office based in Mumbai, and myself, I'm often in Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi, meeting with our great partners at places like the University of Delhi, the Jawaharlal Nehru University, the Indian Institutes of Technology, Institute of Science, and the great National Centre for Biological Sciences in Bangalore, with which we have opened a joint centre on brain repair. So tremendous work. Earlier this year, the university's new India Institute had its inaugural conference. There was a wide range of activities profiled. We had guests from government and business celebrating the existence of this multidisciplinary centre and the university as a leader in Scottish-India relations. We were very honoured that the former President of India, Dr. Kalam, gave an inspiring keynote address at that conference. And we had tremendous delegates. We were delighted that 50 delegates came from India to attend the conference. We were also delighted that prominent members of the Indian diaspora resident, particularly in Scotland, joined us. And that was a tremendously optimistic conference looking at future engagement with India, and one of the outcomes of that optimistic conference is today's celebration. So then this is our opportunity to reinforce our commitment of engaging with higher education institutions and research institutions in India, but also the wider Indian community in Scotland. The university's relationship with India is really flourishing, and it is our intention that every 2nd of October we will have a celebration coinciding with the birthday of Mahatma Gandhi. It's very fitting and opportune that the grandson of the Mahatma, Mr. Gopalkrishna Gandhi, is here with us, so very, very pleased, and he will be delivering the inaugural India Day lecture entitled India Yesterday, India Today. I'm also really, really pleased that the Minister for External Affairs and International Development, Mr. Hamza Yousaf, member of the Scottish Parliament, is with us. He's very, very prominent in international activities in the university, and it is always a pleasure to see him. We also are delighted that Mr. Oscar Keta, the Consul General of India, will also speak. Again, a good friend of the university, and always a pleasure. I would like to thank George Plagatil and Dina Sidva for organising this celebration. I'd like to thank you most warmly for being here, and I'm particularly pleased that prominent members of the Indian diaspora are here. So this is a very important day, and thank you very much for sharing it with us.
Thank you, Principal. I would now like to introduce Mr. Oscar Kakata, the Consul General of India in Edinburgh, who is going to talk about the Consular General's role in developing stronger links between Scotland and India. Oscar.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's been a real pleasure for me to be on this occasion of inauguration of India Day celebrations in the Edinburgh University. And at the outset, I would like to express my thanks to Sir Professor Timothy Say for having extended invitation to me to come and attend this event. And I also take this opportunity to recognize the presence of Mr. Hamza Yousaf. We have been so cooperative all along in all the activities of the consulate. I also take this opportunity to recognize the presence of Dr. Gopalkrishna Gandhi, grandson of Mahatma Gandhi, man who was eminent, man of honor and reputation, but nonetheless, Dr. Gopalkrishna Gandhi has a persona of his own. So it's very befitting that an occasion like this, wherein we are inaugurating the India Day celebration, is being graced by the presence of Dr. Gopalkrishna Gandhi. As Professor Timothy also said, that in May this year we had a very successful conference, Edinburgh India Institute inaugural conference, which was attended by a large number of scholars, both from India and Scotland, and it was a massively successful conference. And this marked the inauguration of the Edinburgh India Institute. And I must place on record my compliments to Dina and George for their unstinting efforts and hard work in organizing the Edinburgh India Institute inaugural conference, and which has also seen in place the very celebration like this, the India Day event, which will be institutionalized every year, so that Edinburgh Institute celebrates this event every year on this day, 2nd October. The range of collaborations between Indian universities and Scottish universities is very, very diverse. Every year, a large number of students come from India to study in Scottish universities, and I have recently been told that the Edinburgh University has started getting more number of Indian students. At the same time, the Indian universities are also extending a number of exchange programs to the overseas students to come and experience India in its fullness. Therefore, what I feel is that there has been so much interaction between the Indian universities and the Scottish universities that an event like this, India Day celebration, is a step in the right direction. And I take this opportunity to thank Professor Roger Jeffrey also to be part of the India Day celebrations, and also giving his best of the efforts to the working and success of the Edinburgh India Institute. I know, we are all waiting to hear for the very inspiring speech by Dr. Gopalkrishna Gandhi, so I must cut myself short here and give way to further proceedings of the event. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kalkutta. I would now like to introduce Mr. Hamza Yousaf, Minister for External Affairs and International Development, Scottish Parliament, who is going to reflect on Scotland and Scotland-India relations. Minister.
Distinguished guests, Consul General Oscar Kakutta, Consul General of India, Professor Timothy O'Shea, Principal of this fantastic university, Dr. Gopalkrishna Gandhi, Mrs. Gandhi, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I asked Mr. Gandhi, I said, "Oh, you're a doctor." I didn't realize. He said, "Not so much a doctor as a patient," but I thought it shows the humility of the man, and a great pleasure to be sharing. It's a huge honour, a genuine, huge honour for me to be sharing the stage with a man of such esteem in his own right, as well as, of course, the family that he represents as well. And what a day to be doing that on. What a day to be doing that on. The birthday of that icon of humanity and world history, Mahatma Gandhi. I had the privilege of attending the Institute's very first conference in May, showcased the Edinburgh University's long-standing academic and research links with its counterparts in India. It was a great privilege because I represented the Scottish Government. I was there on behalf of the First Minister, but also a very personal privilege as well. For somebody who has ancestry, and my grandparents were born in the Punjab of India before moving post-partition. They were born in Ludhiana and Pathankot. So a great personal pleasure for me to come here and to celebrate those links, as well as a great pleasure on behalf of the Scottish Government. Today, as I say, marks the birthday of Mahatma Gandhi, fitting to pay tribute to that man. Gandhi, of course, led India to independence from British rule and inspired movements, civil rights and freedom movements across the world. I think 2 weeks after the referendum on Scottish independence, there's probably a joke in there somewhere about independence from British rule, but I'll move on from that. He also started nationwide campaigns to ease poverty, expand women's rights, build religious and ethnic harmony. These are all issues of great importance today. I understand there will be prayer services and tributes throughout India and across the world, in ceremonies in colleges and universities and local government institutions and so on. But Gandhi was not just important for what he achieved in his time. He was important because the ideals that he expressed were frankly decades ahead of their time. I had the great pleasure of being in India at the tail end of last year, and managed to go to Gandhi's house, which Gandhi stayed in the room for a few years, and it's turned into a museum and a library in Delhi. And there was a quote on the wall, and I thought everybody has their favourite Gandhi quote, and perhaps expressing that idea that his values were years and years ahead of his time. One of the quotes that stood out for me, which I may read part of to you, was this one. It said, "To call women the weaker sex is a libel. It is man's injustice to women. If by strength is meant moral power, then woman is immeasurably man's superior. And if non-violence is the law of our being, then the future is with women. An incredible sentiment to express in the 1940s, or even actually that quote, I think, the end of the 1930s. It's impossible not to be inspired by Gandhi, but also to aspire to his values and to his ideals. His belief in civil liberties and inclusion of the genders and social reform, and of course, non-violence. And it's fitting that in 2007, the United Nations declared today to be the International Day of Non-Violence. That legacy India can rightly be proud of, and it has led to the country now being the world's largest democracy. And many of us watched recently those elections with great interest. Fantastic to see that 150 million people aged 18 to 23, 150 million aged 18 to 23 qualified for the vote for the first time. These young people are undoubtedly the future of India. And as a university, I'm sure as a nation as well, we're very, very interested and looking forward to building strong links with them as they come. I was also reflecting on the way here that as an individual, it's always very important for us to know who we are, our roots, our ancestry. It's so important to know your ancestry, your roots, who you are, because it helps to inform your present, but also, of course, the journey that you wish to take moving forward. As a youngster growing up, I'm ashamed to say, Mr. Gandhi, my mum, she used to wake me up in the morning on a Saturday morning. We would do our primary school from Monday to Friday. We'd find it quite difficult and long, but on a Saturday morning, she would make me up and she'd make me go to Urdu school. And I was very resistant. I refused to get out of bed, but nonetheless, my mum would drag me to this school. It's where we learnt about our language, we learnt about our culture, and a little bit of religion that was thrown in as well. And I was quite resistant, I used to always say to my mum, I used to say, I'm Scottish, and why do I need to know about Pakistan or India or anybody else? But I'm pleased that she persisted in dragging me out of bed, because you get to a stage in your life, you realize the importance of those roots, the importance of knowing that ancestry helps to inform not just who you are today, but who you are and who you wish to be in the future. And the nation is the same. The nation is the same as the individual. The nation has to recognize its past and its history. And that history goes back to India for many, many decades, and in fact centuries. Some of that, of course, is a very uncomfortable history, but it's not something that should be swept under the carpet. It's something we have to know, so we know who we are as a nation, and we can build that relationship with India moving forward in the future. Some of that is uncomfortable. Some of that is to do with the slave trade. Some of that is to do with colonialism. Of course, the first three Governor-Generals of India were Scots. Scottish merchants exploited the trade in India for jute, for tea, and so on and so forth. But also much good came out of that historic relationship. Some of the best seats of learning in India, the greatest seats of learning in India, of course, started by Scots. And on that theme of education, it is, of course, an extraordinarily powerful tool for empowerment. Building higher education links is an important element of Scotland's engagement with India. I'm delighted that there are currently 17 Scottish higher educational institutes, of course, including this one, with academic and research links with Indian universities. I hosted a reception during my visit in 2013 with Indian students, Indian alumni who'd studied in Scottish universities. I have never met people who are so infused and energetic about Scotland. They were fantastic ambassadors and are fantastic ambassadors for our country. Such a warm response despite sometimes a very cold climate. But they were fantastic. They enjoyed their time in Scotland, and that goes to show how important these educational links are above and beyond the courses that run. We value very much the contribution that Indian students make. We hope to have more of them in the future as well. In terms of culture, I understand that our esteemed guest, Mr. Gandhi, set up the Nehru Centre, the cultural arm of the Indian High Commission. I'm very pleased that India and Scotland's tradition of cultural collaboration continues to flourish to this day. We were delighted to welcome Indian musicians to Scotland in January to perform at the Celtic Connections Festival. This is a result of a 3-year reciprocal programme between Celtic Connections and the world-famous Rajasthan International Folk Festival. When I was in India, there was a collaboration between traditional Scottish music, Gaelic music, and some folk music from Kerala. This was a fantastic, it took place in the scene of a very famous museum in Mumbai. This museum, as I was flying from Delhi to Mumbai, I thought out of courtesy for my hosts, I don't know much Hindi at all, but I thought out of courtesy for my hosts I would memorize the name of the museum, which was not particularly easy if I remember from memory. It was the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya Museum. Right? I remember the, oh thank you, very kind. But I committed it to memory, I remember, and this grand museum, even grander if I may say than the McEwen Hall. And I was sitting there and I mentioned the name of the museum, and there was a nice light round of applause, but I remember the curator saying to me afterwards, Minister, you could have just called it the former Prince of Wales Museum, of course. But perhaps a lesson learned from me. But there's a strong cultural collaboration between Scotland and between India. Culture and education are not the only ways. Of course, trade is very important to Scotland as well. India is an important investor in Scotland. Around 10 Indian companies have made an investment in excess of £700 million that create 3,500 jobs. And during my visit last year, I witnessed many signings of many contracts from very innovative water sanitisation and filtration plants in Scotland, and the methods they use, very innovative and cutting edge, right the way through to digital pen technology, which was helping in India's vast bureaucracy. We want to work with India to share our ideas, build our respective economies, and continue to develop deeper and strongest business, education and culture, tourism links as well. Indians and the Indian diasporas are always welcome to Scotland. They have been coming to Scotland for many a decade, and thank God for it, because they've contributed economically, they've contributed to our society, they've helped to prop up our national health service, and thank goodness they've also brought their cuisine with them to Scotland as well. And for all of that, maybe I can just end on another quote, if I may, from that fantastic poet we heard about earlier on, Tagore. This is a quote that is important for politicians, it's important for anybody in civic society, it's important for anybody as an educationalist that has any level of service. And I thought this quote would be perhaps a good one to end on. From Tagore, it said, who said, "I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy." So perhaps for all of us, there's a lesson. There's a lesson there for whatever we do, in whatever capacity, in whichever sector, in whichever field, that we all have a duty to serve. And I promise you, as somebody who's been elected for 3 years, that once you serve, there is an immeasurable amount of joy. And Mr. Gandhi, Mrs. Gandhi, you are most welcome to Scotland at any point. Thank you for gracing us with your presence on this occasion, and I hope, and as we say in Scotland, haste ye back. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I know we have been listening to different speeches so far, but we also wanted to bring a bit of a taste of India too. We'll now have Yamini Kapoor, student and disciple of Dr. Raja Radha Reddy, performing Kuchipudi dance. Yamini. Thank you, Yamini, for that wonderful rendition which you did so effortlessly. I'm sure some of us will be wondering, oh gosh, I wish I could do that. You know who to contact now. I would now like to invite Dr. Dina Sidhwa, Honorary Fellow at the Edinburgh India Institute, to say a few words about Mr. Gandhi. Dina.
Friends, it is with great pleasure that I introduce Mr. Gopalkrishna Gandhi to you. It is indeed a privilege to be able to say a few words about him. Mr. Gopalkrishna Gandhi is a former civil servant and diplomat who has held a number of senior posts. Needless to say that he is the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi, but in his own right is a distinguished scholar and a statesman. He is married to Tara Gandhi, who is an ornithologist and who we are also very privileged to say is with us today. Mr. Gandhi has had a distinguished career as the Secretary to the Vice President of India and Secretary to the President of India. He's been India's High Commissioner to South Africa, India's High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, and Ambassador to Norway and Iceland. He was also the first director of the Nehru Centre in London. Under his stewardship, the Nehru Centre developed into a forum for Indo-British mutuality in the cultural, literary, and academic fields. From 2004 to 2009, he served as the Governor of West Bengal. He's now a senior fellow at the Center for Public Affairs and Critical Theory at the Shiv Nadar University in India. Among the books he has authored, he has written a novel called Refuge on the subject of Indian Tamil plantation laborers in Sri Lanka, and a play in English verse, Dara Shuko, on the life of Emperor Shah Jahan's eldest son. He has also compiled the Oxford India Gandhi Essential Writings. The University of Natal, South Africa, conferred a doctorate of laws honoris causa on him in 1999, and the University of Sri Lanka, a Doctor of Letters honoris causa in 2001. Dr. Gandhi, Mr. Gandhi as he would like to be called, has given several lectures. Some of these include the Alan Paton Memorial Lecture in South Africa in 1997, the Nehru Memorial Lecture in 2010 in London, the Kamla Lecture in Kolkata in 2012. This year, he's given several lectures, important lectures in New Delhi, the Maulana Azad Memorial Lecture, the Ambedkar Memorial Lecture. He also delivered the Bernard Soiza Memorial Lecture in Colombo earlier this year. What we're really proud about, though, is the lecture that he so powerfully gave at the Scottish Parliament this Tuesday on independence, dream, and reality. And now, we look forward to hearing what Mr. Gandhi has to say. Thank you, Mr. Gandhi.
No, I'm fine, thank you. Professor Sir Timothy O'Shea, Principal and Vice Chancellor, Minister Mr. Hamza Yusuf, Consul General of India, Oscar Kerketa, Professor Roger Jeffries, Dr. Palatil, Dr. Sidhwa, Lord Meghnad Desai in the audience, ladies and gentlemen. Listening to this long list of speeches that I am supposed to have delivered, I was reminded of what Orhan Levi, the great Turkish statesman, said. What have we not done for our country? some of us have given our lives, and some of us have given speeches. When I was a child, which is a very, very long time ago, and my sole identity was that of a grandson, the English song I heard sung over and over again at home and learnt to sing was Cardinal Newman's Lead, Kindly Light. Lead, kindly light, amid the encircling gloom. 6 decades on, my only valid identity being that of a grandfather, I rejoice when I hear my 2 tiny granddaughters play on the iPad over and over again one particular animated song, and I join their singing of it. It cannot be called a great song like Cardinal Newman's Lead, Kindly Light, but it is a greatly enjoyable song, and it goes, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hand, clap, clap. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hand, clap, clap. The younger of the 2 granddaughters has a shorter name for the song. She calls it simply Happy No Clap Clap. I know they will one day learn Lead, Kindly Light, but I am glad today they are singing Happy No Clap Clap. India today, as Minister Yusuf reminded us, has a large and growing population, large and growing, staying very young. Happy, if also very often somewhat obese, wearing rings and strings, charms on its arms, Ray-Ban specs over its noses, and musky perfumes in very large doses. Now it has growing number of the new rich, the commercially driven, the industrially and technologically, especially IT empowered, who are happy, know it, and are clapping their hands 24/7. India today knows it is, literally, level with and in many ways ahead of others in the world's reach for Mars's orbit, red and beckoning among the sky's great stars. And what is more, it has shown in a very Indian way, which Scotland will approve, that it can get to the same place, the same site as anyone else, with the same, even better speed, at 1/3 or even less the cost. Its great scientists have been led to Mars by a kindly light, and my is India happy, and knowing it, how it is clapping. Now, an era has passed between the singing of those 2 songs in India. I'll share a few thoughts with you on both those eras on this India Day, a great day for me to remember and commemorate in the University of Edinburgh, for which I congratulate and thank the university. Let me start with a self-question. Can India have a day, a single day, marking it? Can the Indian Ocean shrink into a grain of sea sand, or the Himalaya to a pebble? Can 1.2 billion people of infinite variety, each group unique, each individual distinct, can that India, so unique, so distinctive, so large, Himalayan, oceanic, be captured in one mugshot image? If yes, even in theory, it can be only in the island that thought it could capture and hold a subcontinent. Only the British Isles can try hold India in a day. Or, in William Blake's phrase, eternity in an hour, and be so good at it. It is an honor to be invited by the university, as I said, and to speak at this India Day. I once again thank the principal, Professor Timothy O'Shea, and the Edinburgh Indian University for bestowing Edinburgh India Institute for bestowing this honor on me. May I be deserving of this privilege, and particularly of this phenomenal venue. If anybody on a glorious sunny day like this can be inside any building, it can only be this building. Edinburgh University's circling of October the 2nd for India Day links a martyr for faith, St. Andrews, with a martyr for peace, Mohandas Gandhi. It revives the link between the Scots founder of the Indian National Congress, Alan Octavian Hume, with the Congress's most famous leader, Mahatma Gandhi. But India Day in Edinburgh does something else which is very important as well. It helps us in India see Gandhi, not just as an Indian phenomenon, not just as an Indian possession, not just as part of India's heritage, but as one the world knows as a freshwater aquifer in the deserts of its very troubled conscience. Now, aquifers also have their thirsts. Aquifers also need recharging. Gandhi found intellectual and moral recharge in a saint the world knew as a chemist. Our principal referred to, Professor Prafulla Chandra Rai, or Acharya, the great teacher as we call him, who studied here at Edinburgh University in the late 1880s. Now, he was a path-breaking scientist, but history remembers P.C. Ray as a mendicant who was much more than his academic greatness made him recognized. He was a mendicant in the halls of time, a mendicant for India's greatness. The austerity of P.C. Ray's life was as spectacular as his discoveries of rare chemicals. Research can wait, he said. This is P.C. Ray. Research can wait. Industry can wait, but independence cannot wait. It meant, quite literally, non-dependence or self-reliance. That was Ray's concept of independence, which went well beyond the lowering of one flag and the raising of another. I believe he would not have disapproved my choice of the subject for today's India lecture, which is India yesterday and India today. And I must explain what exactly I mean by India yesterday. By India yesterday, I have in mind the 19th and 20th centuries, when she found for herself a sense of being India, not a patchwork India of stitched together parts, spatial or ideological, but India as India. This self-awareness came from a sense, as real as it was inchoate, of something in India, something indefinable, something which might be called intangible, being greater than its circumstances, stronger than its chains, tougher than all its brutishness, both foreign and homegrown, which was holding it down. It came from a sense of injustice being suffered it as a political totality, a geopolitical collectivity, and a conceptual verity at the hands of a colonizing power that was stronger than itself, rather as an intellectually challenged behemoth is, but smaller than itself in every other. And the idea of its inner bigness came to India, also from a growing awareness that if India was feeling low, it was because it was in 100 different ways acting low and being low. It came from a slowly rising awareness of the scale of its self-inflicted wrongs, its own doings. Those were times when this self-awareness became a tidal wave of great energy, turning small times into great moments and small preoccupations into great undertakings that endowed the littleness of her preoccupations with a new vitality and a drive to revive and to reform, to celebrate and to correct. Those times, those yesterdays, saw most significantly the visionary social reformer Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, both from Bengal, as brave as they were wise, lock horns with narrow orthodoxy and petty conformism. It saw the chapter-turning Jyotirao Phule and Pandita Ramabai from Maharashtra hold up the mirror to Indian society's exploitative and debased social practices, and in particular, its hideous mistreatment of women. And I am very grateful to Minister Yusuf for having today selected from among a myriad quotations he could have selected of Gandhi, the one that he did about the status of women. India yesterday, or yesterday's India, saw the one and only such monk, Vivekananda, startle the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893. Now, he made this phenomenal journey to Chicago when very few people from India had gone there to address the World Parliament of Religions, leaving many people in India rather puzzled about how he would fare and what he would say and what he would achieve. But he startled that Congress by his exposition of the spiritual traditions of India, but so much more. I am proud to belong to a religion, said Vivekananda in Chicago in 1893. I am proud to belong to a religion which has taught the world both tolerance and universal acceptance. And then going on to say something we should repeat to ourselves 100 times in India today. Vivekananda said, sectarianism, bigotry, and its horrible descendant fanaticism have long possessed this beautiful earth. They have filled the earth with violence, drenched it often and often with human blood, destroyed civilization, and sent whole nations into despair. Vivekananda could have been speaking to us in India and to our world today. His erudition in the scriptures and his rootedness in religion did not blind him to the fact that India was a great nation of very weak-minded men, capable nonetheless, despite their great legacy, of bullying those weaker than themselves. In a memorable comment, he said to Indian youths, "You will be nearer to heaven through football than through the study of the Bhagavad Gita." India yesterday saw Rabindranath Tagore in 1913, a Nobel Prize for Literature, C.V. Raman win it in 1931 for physics, and the third Nobel for peace eluded Gandhi to become the only Nobel that is more real in its spectacular omission than it could have ever been in its literal conferment. India today, therefore, has to be not just India's day or a day for India, but a day when we can and must recall the meaning, full and throbbing, of a word now hardly used, or used, if at all, as a description of something that belongs as a fleeting shadow must to a past, Renaissance. And so as we celebrate India Day, we celebrate all that which comes to new life and must come to new life by the germinal laws of moral endeavor, academic burgeoning, cultural fecundity, and human self-renewal. When the political aquifers plummet, the ethical and aesthetic water tables rise. It is difficult to establish the correlation, but it is impossible not to notice it. I am no blind worshipper of yesterdays, which, as the great Indians that I mentioned, knew to be deeply flawed. Nor am I, by the glories of today, overawed. Most present here must know of the incident, which is recalled often, so often in fact, as to have almost lost its value. But it does bear repetition today on India Day in Edinburgh. I refer to the event in 1893 when Mohandas Gandhi, traveling on a first-class ticket from Durban to Pretoria, was ejected from the train on account of being what was called then a man of color. When Gandhi was evicted from the train, an Indian visiting South Africa fell. But when Gandhi rose, an Indian South African rose. And every kind of Indian became one Indian in him. The North Indian, the South Indian, the Hindu, the Muslim, the Christian, Parsi, Sikh, Brahmin, and the so-called untouchable. When Gandhi fell, he was doubtless in some disbelief, being thrown out of a train, though stationary, is very unexpected. So he was definitely in disbelief. Being human, his disbelief must have also turned the very next instant to some kind of rage and fury. But the traumatic moment is also a very alchemic moment. It alchemizes very strangely and unexpectedly the trauma itself. Something transformed his rage to a kind of light. I had the fortune of reflecting upon that incident at an event in 1996 when President Nelson Mandela gave to Gandhi posthumously keys to that very city of Pietermaritzburg. And I may be permitted to share with you what I then said. Gandhi fell with a railway ticket that was dishonored. He rose with a testament that symbolized honor. He fell a traveler, but rose a turbine. Fell a lawyer, but rose a statesman. His legal brief became a political cause. His sense of human decency transformed itself into a passion for human justice. The personal died within him that very moment and turned public. Mine became thine. In fact, Mohandas Gandhi was not flung from a stationary train. He was launched from a moving vehicle of destiny. And no honor that has been given or can be given to Gandhi can match President Nelson Mandela's making that man an honorary citizen of that city in his new country. What happened in Pietermaritzburg happened to an individual. The impact on the India that I have called in this talk India yesterday was profound. About 25 years later, a similar life-changing event took place in India, not to one individual, but to an uncounted and uncountable number. When on April 13, 1919, General Dyer opened for the British Empire ravenous gunfire in Jallianwala Bagh, Amritsar, in the Punjab, killing in the space of 10 minutes, at the very least, 379 people. As many human beings fell, but they fell only to rise at the very same moment as so many flaming torches. They became India, and India became them. Tagore returned his knighthood. Gandhi unveiled his first major all-India campaign, and nothing was to be the same again after Jallianwala Bagh. Not Indian politics, not Indian society, and certainly not the imagination of India's young. That moment, that galvanic moment, remained active in what I like to think of as India yesterday, the India of the struggle for freedom. The short term became almost incidental. The only term was the long term. Youths gave up studies in the thousands, many their jobs in government, and enlisted in the struggle, courting arrest for civil disobedience, for defiance of the government. And non-compliance with orders. Now, non-compliance is a very simple term, but non-compliance with orders from a regime which is very military is no simple matter. It can lead to indefinite jailing and unforeseeable personal discomforts. Non-compliance with orders against assembly or public expression of views led to jail terms. These were accepted with cheer and without demur. It must be said here that the British administration did not torture its prisoners in quite the same way as some other colonizers did, but it was fairly ruthless when it came to curbing freedoms, and this was endured without complaint. Idealism was idealism. Patriotism was its own reason and its own reward. There was no telling at that time for those who were fighting for freedom, as to whether freedom would come in their own lifetime. No one was sure, if jailed, as to when they would come out. Some jails were a nightmare, the cellular prison in the Andamans being on the top of the notorious list. Gandhi said political prisoners could ask for jail reforms which would benefit everybody, but nobody, he said, should whine about personal discomfort in jail, nor seek a premature release on bail for personal grounds. The message was simple. We are simple people, small people, in a big cause. Let us be worthy of the cause. It was all about a larger goal, the bigger picture. The freedom of India deserved nothing but complete dedication. And the goal went beyond freedom, and it went even beyond India. 6, I would say, before independence, heading the Provisional Government of India, Jawaharlal Nehru convened an Asian Relations Conference in Delhi and invited Gandhi to address it. Leaders from several Asian nations, future heads of government, attended it. Addressing the delegates, Nehru said, Asia is finding herself. One of the notable consequences of the European domination of Asia has been the isolation of the countries of Asia from one another. Today, this isolation is breaking down. This was another long-term goal. This was part of the longer vision that had become the vision of India that was yesterday. This was another far sight. India was looking ahead, not to lead, but to link, and not to swagger, but to support and be supported in redeeming lost opportunities, lost pathways to a shared progress towards an order that was as lofty as it was humane. Non-alignment, Afro-Asian unity, and a just world economic order were in the air. Rivalries and opportunistic alliances were at a discount. Joining one or another bloc was out of the question. There was a clear leaning in Nehru towards the socialist states to the world, a desire to work with them. But this was yet an expression of his own socialist way of thought and an expression of India's ideal for a world free from the hegemonies of the past. This view ran its risks, for hegemony is hegemony, whatever be its official color. But there was a bigness around in India yesterday. This is not to say that there was no smallness to be seen in India yesterday. Oh yes, there was a great deal of smallness in yesterday's India as well. There was, for one thing, a great deal of mutual envy. Now, envy is a universal trait, but India may be said to have a postdoc in envy. It is ever the shadow of achievement, as envy's older sister, a double postdoc, ego, is ever the escort of everything undertaken. Even a great struggle can have envy and ego shackling it and curbing it and making its advance a three-legged race. There are those, even in great times in great countries, who are so smitten by envy that attending a wedding, they would like to be the bridegroom. And why? Attending a funeral, they would not mind being in the coffin. But such men were not wanting in India yesterday. But they were a contemptible exception. The rule was not envy. The rule was camaraderie. The rule was not ego. The rule was sharing and dedication and sacrifice. This was Renaissance. And this Renaissance knew that in that India, there was so much that was not right and so much that was in fact grossly wrong and unworthy of those great times. Chief among these was the sectarian tension that Vivekananda and Jyotirao Phule had warned India about, Hindu-Muslim differences, and those between the so-called upper castes and the millions who were regarded as lower castes and even untouchable. Congress, as a party under Gandhi's leadership, tried to erase these differences and the discriminations they led to. And one man above others, from a tradition of protest which was completely different from Gandhi's and Nehru's, came to the nation's call. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, from India's most oppressed classes, with his legal training and conceptual acuity, began framing a constitution for India as only a man with his experience, personal experience of discrimination, and his own intellectual assessment of how that discrimination should be handled in a new nation could have forged. This was a living document that he created, if ever there was one, with words as sharp instruments and not as hollow sounds. But the nation as such had been soaked too long in the dead hand of custom and prejudice. Sectarian strife had only gone into hiding, yielding place to the better instincts and higher impulses of Renaissance India. It had not been overcome, with the result that on the bigger picture came to be superimposed a set of smaller pictures, with the result that even as the picture of independent India was unveiled, the canvas got divided. Spaces shrank and time crunched itself. And in one moment, the present, the magical present, in one moment became the past. Trysts became anniversaries. Leaders became statues. And the glowing horizon became a dull and boring background. The future became a was. The ideal became a memory. The dream became a page in a sepia book, material for speeches like this one. The long term shriveled the short term in the India of yesterday. But suddenly, now, the short term minimized the long term. Gandhi had said he was born in India, but made in South Africa. Nelson Mandela said famously, as only he could do with his moral height to us in India, "You sent us a lawyer. We returned him to you as a Mahatma." And then he added with his famous twinkle, "But you did not look after him." How right he was. Those were true words coming from a true man. But looking after Gandhi is, of course, not what India became free for. It was for looking after those that needed looking after. Has India done that? In many quite remarkable ways, she has. The most striking thing about India today is her incredible advance in scientific research and development. Our space programs and the mission to Mars are only the most spectacular symbol of our advance in what may be called the cutting edge or the frontier sciences. This is about the skies. The other, no less significant, if less dramatic, achievement of the scientific endeavor in India is on terra firma. Now, no Sri Lankan would like to be told, "Oh, are you from India?" No, I am not from India. I am from Sri Lanka, is what would be the Sri Lankan's natural reaction. But Tarzi Vitachi, the great Sri Lankan journalist, in a New York cab, was asked by the driver, who was looking at him through the rear view mirror, "Are you from India?" He said, "No." "Oh, I thought you were from the country where they breed like rabbits." Now, Tazi Vitachi could have continued to say, no, I'm not that Indian, I'm Sri Lankan. But something in him, something of the Asian in him said, "I must now respond for Asia." He said, "I am not from the country where they breed like rabbits, but from the country where they do not die like flies anymore." The fall in the death rate in India through the systems of immunological intervention has been the most profound and, in my view, the most transformational achievement of India today. Not in the skies, but on terra firma. In every Indian home and work establishment, you will find one or two individuals, miracles no less, working away with zeal, with devotion, the very epitome of responsibility towards taking the Renaissance forward. But Unfortunately, and this is something which I must admit, in every establishment, there are 2 or 3 who pull the weight, but there are many more than 7 or 8 who are slovenly, sluggish, and parasitic. India is, all said and done, a nation of irreconcilables. We have the noblest of workers, a golden few who lead by example, and a vast assembly of shirkers, a leaden multiplicity. We have pioneers, a millennial band, and we have parasites, a millennial baggage. Thanks to some pioneers, Indians live well longer now than they ever did, and as Tazi Vitachi so dramatically explained. And of course, those in the upwardly mobile classes, the middle classes, live much better than they ever did. There is scarcely an Indian today whose feet lack footwear. Very often, very designer footwear are worn. And no matter what the design comes, sometimes as a perfect fake. But a perfect fake is also as perfect as it is fake. And improvisation is also a clever design. If there are wrists to be seen without watches, it is only because time is now checked on mobile phones, which virtually every Indian carries. And all of India, including a large number of its miners, carries mobile phones, smartphones, sometimes multiples of them. But even as modern technology grows and enters the lives of average citizens, old superstitions have tightened their hold on the Indian mind. If 1 billion men and women wear watches and carry cell phones, they also now, much more than their ancestors did, wear charms and totem bits on their persons, propitiating old deities and new voodoo obsessions. Many here would have heard of Vastu, a force governing buildings. Now, Vastu is said to be a supernatural energy governing the fate of built structures and thereby determining the welfare of its occupants. You will find most modern and internationally traveled persons in India today drawing plans for their houses in ways that are Vastu cleared before they are cleared by the town planner. India yesterday, poor as she was, less educated than she is now, was moving away from superstition. India today, linked into the fastest technologies, using fast-moving vehicles, listening to fast music, eating fast foods, is fast-forwarded and also fast-rewinded. If any country in the world can zoom forward and lunge backward in real time, India can and is doing it. Does that fast-forward and fast-rewind mean India today is stuck between progress and stagnation? I cannot rebut that confidently, but I do believe with complete certainty that the India of Ram Mohan Roy, Vivekananda, Tagore, Gandhi, P.C. Roy, and Nehru is not meant to be stuck. Belief is not subject to testing. But we are, all said and done, a nation of paradoxes. India today has men and women respelling their names with impossible multiple vowels and consonants to conform to the nostrums of numerology. Vehicles' registration numbers are also often chosen or requisitioned with reference to auspiciousness. It is another matter that the owner of the divinely approved number plate is a horrendous offender of traffic rules. Traffic on Indian roads is a grand terror, the motorcycle being the grandest of all. The overwhelming number of motorcyclists are restless young men who have come into ownership of a powered vehicle for the first time. They ride the two-wheeled orthopedic cruncher, not just to reach destinations double quick, but to assert themselves. The intellectually unsuperior, if not downright inferior, but physically stronger, socially privileged, financially self-loading, professionally preferred, and impossibly self-righteous Indian male is an embarrassment to human intelligence. As a father until old age makes him slow down. As a husband, until increasing infirmities and decreasing incomes make him depend more and more on his wife. As a son who assumes the position of bread earner, the insensitive Indian male would have been a Disneyland animator's delight had he not been so capable and so culpable of hurting the Indian woman. Hurtling above speed limits, winding his wheeling bone breaker through and past the narrowest opening between poor pedestrians and expensive limousines to get from everywhere to everywhere, the motorcyclist is the most representative symbol of short-sighted, short-tempered, short-termist male aggression in India today. Today's India is vehicular, not pedestrian. Not in numbers, for pedestrian India still forms the majority, thank God. But in terms of force majeure, vehicular India rules. And that is a rule of rules. In the 3 countries that make Scandinavia, the king or queen are often pedestrians. But more pertinently, if the king in Norway is a pedestrian, the pedestrian in Norway is also some kind of a king. Limos, cars, buses, containers grind to a halt at a pedestrian crossing for a lone pedestrian on Oslo's streets, no less than a person might on beholding a tusker across his path. Now, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark are monarchies. India yesterday was a colony in part and under native kings in other part. India today is a democracy. The majority must rule in a democracy, or at least have the bigger say. But pedestrian India, the majority, defers to vehicular India, the hugely powerful minority. The pedestrian way, the footpath as it used to be called, or the sidewalk, is becoming non-existent. In the developed world, the pedestrian has rights. In India, the pedestrian has luck. Why this difference? In India, the dynamics of a society that is emerging from poverty are at work. They turn a vehicle or any vehicle into something other than a means of transportation. They turn it into a form of self-confidence or self-assertion. For a poor youth, to own a bicycle is progress. To own a motorcycle is empowerment. And to acquire access to the steering wheel of a lorry or a car with or without a driving license is to move into lunar space. So, like a child that finds a 3-wheeled toy car thrilling only when pedaling it faster and faster, vehicular India wants to race. Vehicular India today is on a race. India today is vehicular. But where is it going? Who is winning and who is losing? The whirligig of manufacture is so like a race, each automobile giant running to make more, make fast, make better, make, that it wants to sell more, sell faster, sell better, sell. Does this massive race in manufacture, in production, of which the throbbing and thick infusion of fuel-guzzling vehicles each day onto our roads are a striking sign, have a flip side? Safe pedestrian crossings is a phrase I used in the strictly physical context of our roads. The phrase safe pedestrian crossings was used as a metaphor by a former president of India, K.R. Narayanan, memorably and meaningfully. He incidentally knew what being a pedestrian meant. So in his Republic Day address in 2000, when he was at the peak of his presidency, the Republican address of 2000, President Narayanan said, very memorably, and in a way in which I can never forget, that what happens in our towns and cities, the unabashed, vulgar indulgence in conspicuous consumption by the nouveau riche, has left the underclass seething in frustration. One half of our society guzzles aerated beverages, while the other has to make do with palmfuls of muddied water. Our three-way fast lane, this is President speaking, our three-way fast lane of liberalization, privatization, and globalization must provide safe pedestrian crossings for unempowered India so that it too can move towards equality of opportunity. Now, the pedestrian cannot be taken to be an all-time and all-place submissive. He or she may cower before traffic waves in our cities, but not every pedestrian lives unempowered in India's cities. He is to be found, and more importantly, she is to be found, the metaphorical pedestrian, in our forests and in our villages near forests, and in villages all over India. The pedestrian must not be left to turn into a fury. Unempowered India's furies have acquired mobility in the Maoist movement, and not that long ago in West Bengal, when police personnel saw Maoists come not on foot, but on that wheeled arrow of fury, the motorcycle. They came on a convoy of motorcycles, and their deed done disappeared as quickly in a cloud of dust, smoke, and blood. And they were led by a woman with a gaze, newspapers said, resembled that of a furious human being. If every Indian is to be given equality of status and opportunity in India today, as every Indian should be, then status quo cannot continue. Corporates and bulk consumers of water and fuel have to forego some digits in their graphs so that others can come up an inch. This reflects a physical law, but metaphorically speaking, vehicular India will have to turn partly, at least partly, into pedestrian India if India today is to survive. And again, metaphorically speaking, if our resources, including metal, coal, and fossil fuels, have to suffice for all Indians to have a bicycle, a great many to have motorcycles, and many to be able to drive and own lorries and cars, those who have a multiplicity of cars will have to cut back on their fleets and descend from their chariots of excess. And that is where we are in trouble. No corporate honcho or political leader in India today is to do a Gandhi or a P.C. Ray. He will not advocate frugality, controlled consumption, sharing, or equity. The name of the game in India today is go for it, faster and faster. India today needs development. But instead of development for India, it is more like India for the developers. Peter-Maritzburg, 1893, gets reenacted ever so often in the broken lives of disempowered citizens at the invisible hands of those with social, political, and economic clout. This happens in the villages, it happens in our towns and cities, creating new classes of the underprivileged, which P. Sainath, the fearless Indian journalist, has described as not the poverty line, not the below poverty line, but the destitution line. Time is running out for India today. Experts may debate the cubic foot measure of glacial sinking, but the fact is indisputable that nothing less than lifestyle and work style changes will have to be made by the water splurging, the power splurging, the fuel splurging classes in lifestyle revolutions are not to be visited upon them. Imagine a situation which, believe me, is not only inconceivable, but actually quite imminent. When monsoon failures dry up dams and rivers to an extent, when we in India have to bathe not twice a day, but once in 2 days, drink not half the amount of water we do, but half of that half and then half of that half. No big deal there if you think of it, considering that unempowered India manages with such quantities anyway. But I'm imagining for a moment the rationing of water and extending that to food, simply because we as a people in India today have not acted in time. Who will suffer when climate change-driven sea level rise threatens the Lakshadweep, the Sundarban, coastal Bengal, and Odisha with submersion? Who will suffer when cyclones lash the Andhra and Tamil Nadu coasts? We have heard of climate refugees. These need not be from across borders. They could be interstate, intrastate. It all depends on the gravity of the displacement. But dizzied by its techno-commercial races, India's political, industrial, and scientific leadership is being grossly negligent, dangerously lethargic, and in fact, culpably unmindful of what it should be doing for climate justice. Our short-termism is unbelievable. It does not realize that development will eat into itself unless it is climate compatible. Our short-termism is notching up a debit card bill our children will have to pick up without the means to do so. India yesterday saw Indians move in multitudes from depression to hope, from ignorance to knowledge, from medievalism to modern thought. India today sees Indians move from villages to cities, from poverty in a languishing agriculture to uncertain livelihood in whimsical self-employment, but from despair to desperation, changing one kind of frustration into another. India today has a powerful political, technological, entrepreneurial leadership manning its engine that sees land as factory sites. It sees water not as water but as electricity, trees not as trees but as timber, granite as potential cement. It sees villages as potential towns, towns as cities, cities as metropolises. India today sees neighbors as traders, visitors as tourists, countries and continents in terms of groups of interests. It sees monsoons as trade winds, oceans as homes to sea floor minerals, natural gas, and hydrocarbons. It sees space itself, in fact, as capital. And above all, it sees time as money. It places clout above influence, strength above stature, biceps above brains. India yesterday wanted India. And this is a fact. India yesterday wanted India to be just a country in the world that had no superpowers. India today wants India to be rich and to be a superpower in itself. This inorganic changeover in self-image is about bettering life for a growing minority at the expense of a dispossessed and disconsolate majority. And that is unjust, unethical, and it is wrong. I will conclude now with a passing reflection on another majority. The greatest laurel on the broad forehead of India today is that it is the world's largest electoral democracy. India elected to office in Kerala the world's first popularly elected government headed by EMS Namboodiripad, the communist leader. India electorally dismissed a government headed by Indira Gandhi that had placed the country under a national emergency in which all civic rights had been suspended. India today brings parties to power with generosity and sends them packing without mercy. This is more than an achievement. It is truly a magnificence. It is a democratic magnificence. But here too, we see the fast forward and rewind paradox happening. As in any wholesome democracy, a political majority determines who is to form the government of India. The person who commands a majority in the House of the People is invited by the President to be Prime Minister. Now that political majority has nothing to do and should have nothing to do with India's ethnic majority, its linguistic or religious majority. But there is in India today a real possibility of the political majority getting fused and confused with its ethnic and religious majority. There is in India today a reflexive possibility of India's religious minorities forming political outfits on the basis of religion. This is a retrograde development, for democracies are meant to be about policy choices, not about prejudice choices. The mutation through the sanctification of the ballot box of electoral options into religious polarizations can bring a secular democracy to the doorstep of a majoritarian theocracy. This will not be a fault of the democratic tree, but an unrecognizable mutant, wholly alienated from India yesterday in its vision and its methods. There is an allied danger in this. India yesterday was committed to nuclear disarmament. It still is, but thanks to the grim realities of today, more in theory than in substance, We cannot afford to disarm, it is said, when we are surrounded by nuclear warheads. Is a convincing argument, and I see its point. The existence of violent, barbaric terrorist organizations in India's neighborhood, speaking the distorted language of jihad, makes India and Pakistan both vulnerable to non-state entities' nuclear blackmail. The theory of nuclear deterrence is a theory of faith, faith in a dormant volcano's commitment to endless sleep. It is a lullaby that is proof perhaps against nightmares, but not against the night itself. Religious polarization between Hindus and Muslims, fluxing into political antagonisms, is a recipe for communal riots which mimic war. They are, in fact, dress rehearsals for war. And so I lament the entering of iron into the soul of India today and of Pakistan today. Pakistan, with its history of the army telescoping into politics, has been predisposed to armed engagement for long. But I lament the conversion of one part of India's mind into a permanent war department. It makes war that much closer and militarizes our reflexes. There is a danger of religious revivalism in both countries and in Bangladesh, bringing back all the sectarianism, the bigotry, and the fanaticism Swami Vivekananda had warned the world about. This is where the world of scholarship, the universe of knowledge, is so potent. And this is where a university like yours here can send a powerful message. Peace is not pious. Peace is not prayerful. It is embattled. It is surrounded by its enemy, which is not war, but the mentality of war. Peace is tough to maintain, tougher to return to once it has been lost. And it is in the safeguarding of the climate of peace in the world that the world of scholars, the universe of learning, has a task to perform. Gandhi was asked in London on his last visit to England in 1931, how far would you cut off India from the empire? From the empire, he said, entirely. But from the British nation, not at all. Empireship must go, he said. India should love to be an equal partner with Britain, sharing her joys and sorrows, but it must be a partnership on equal terms. India today, ladies and gentlemen, in Edinburgh University, is being celebrated as India Day, but not as India's day as much as it is a day for that which is civilized and civilizing, as against all that is brutal and brutalizing within India and everywhere. It is a day for partnerships to make our yesterdays, when troubles seemed so far away, redeem our tomorrows. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gandhi, for that riveting, fascinating, and wonderful lecture. I'm sure many of you will be eagerly waiting to ask questions to Mr. Gandhi. May I invite Professor Roger Jeffrey, Dean for India and the Director of Edinburgh India Institute, to lead on this.
I don't know how many of you can think of any question that might cover the range of issues that we've just heard talked about. But I can tell you, as a result of being at Mr. Gandhi's lecture in the Parliament on Tuesday, is that he may be, and obviously is, a superb speaker, and he's also a superb answerer of questions. So if you do have a question, please let me hear about it. I think there are some, I hope there are some microphones around. to help us to hear what you have to say. Yes, there's a hand up here, and there's a hand, and there is a microphone coming to you. Do I have any more that I can pick up? We'll take 2 or 3 at the same time. Another one here after that.
Yes.
Please. Can we please have a question and
Yes.
not a statement?
Yes, the question is if you could make a correlation between India and some other developing nations. The one that comes to my mind at the moment, because you spoke a lot about South Africa, would be Mexico or many other countries in Latin America. So if you could try to give us like what would be your perspective on what you believe that India's relationship would be at the moment with these countries, or how could your philosophy go towards some other Indian nations, Indian American nations? Thank you.
Thank you. And there's a question over here.
I hope this works. Gopal, you probably didn't hear the BBC News this morning, but we were told that the Prime Minister is promising clean towns and cities by 2020 with the removal of a great deal of rubbish. I wonder if you would greet that news with joy or a shudder.
Is there any other question before we move? You want? Yes.
Yeah. My question was, in 1912, when Rabindranath Tagore's Gitanjali was published, there was a poem in it, Where the Mind is Without Fear. It's been 102 years, and the poem ends with the line saying, into that heaven of freedom, my father, let my country awake. Do you think the country has awakened to that heaven of freedom?
Okay, thank you.
Let me, this is often done when 2 or 3 questions are asked. The responder says, let me start with the last question. And this is not because the preceding questions are less important, but because memory is such, it selects the recent most. So I will answer the last question first, but I have jotted down the first 2. Now, the Gitanjali is undoubtedly an extraordinary work of literary art. Tagore did his Bengali literature, his own Bengali literary output, put it in a little trouble by attempting to translate it into English himself. Now, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high is a great sounding composition translated by himself. But the Bengali, for those here who may know Bengali, is just absolutely out of this world. He says, I shall not impose it on you, but it is absolutely astounding. The emphasis being on the head held high. Uchcho jatha shir. Now, the head held high. There is undoubtedly in India a sense of a new development, a new chapter being turned in India, and its head being held high. Now, at a meeting in business center, business school yesterday, Lord Desai was discussing the difference between nation and the nation state. It is one thing for the nation state to hold its head high, and every nation would want the nation state's head to be held high. Space programs, rising rates of growth, and then most importantly, and most dangerously, some kind of weaponized fireworks. Now, each time a missile shoots up into the sky, there is something that says head held high. But what about the nations within the nation state? The different communities of people, not ethnic or religious necessarily, but communities in terms of populations, the peoplehood of India. when their heads are bent low with problems of livelihood, with problems of dispossession, whose head is held high? Now, Tagore spoke of the individual and the collective. Today, I think, the self-confidence of India is the self-confidence of a very important part of India, but still just a part of India. It is only when, as Gandhi wanted and as Tagore envisioned, a general sense of self-respect, which is not at the expense of a neighbor, but sufficient unto itself, happens. That is when Uchcho Jatha Shir. I hope I've addressed your question. Thank you, sir, for telling me about the radio news. Yes, I have been aware of it. And one of the finest, I would say, statements to have come from our Prime Minister has been about cleaning up our cities. His message to the country that we should have a cleanliness drive, we should have a clean India in terms of the removal of garbage, was a very important and a very heartwarming message. I rejoiced in it, and I still do, and I do. And I think the way, and this is not a comment on the civic administrations of India, on the municipalities and corporations of India, but on us, on ourselves. We are very keen on being clean and pure ourselves, but we do not mind transferring the waste to our neighbor's yard. We want our doorsteps clean, but we do not care about the road. This is not a reflection on the municipalities and corporations of India, but on ourselves. And I think our Prime Minister's message about a clean India was a very important message, and he was talking to all of us, to the institutions, to the administration, and to the people of India. And I congratulate him and thank him on it. And I don't know why 2020, why it should take that long. But if he's thinking also, I hope he is, of ridding India of one great monopoly, and that is the monopoly of the plastic lobby of India, then he will be doing a millennial service to India. Of all the many monopolies, the most unshakable is that of the constant burgeoning of plastic carry bags, when none are necessary, multitudes of them. To sell one banana, you get a plastic bag. The peel is biodegradable. The bag remains forever. And no government has been able to shake the plastic lobby because of its great clout. If by 2020 he means to rid India of the control of our plastic bosses, he will be doing a great service. I thank you, sir, for having asked the question about South Africa, India, and Latin America. There is a natural bond between these countries. It is not a manufactured bond. It is an organic bond. And it has been truly said about India and South Africa that there were two freedoms, but one struggle. India and South Africa walked into two freedoms, but through one struggle. And that is what must obtain between India and the countries of Latin America, and indeed what used to be called very confidently the South. And I believe that has gone into the shade under the great diversions of Davos.
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed. I think we have time for 3 more questions, and I'm only going to take them from women.
I may say that there may be time, but there is no compulsion.
So only from women, please. Otherwise, we should get very upset. These people who put their hands up, who look remarkably like men, I shall not take a question from. So can I have some questions from some women? This was a very important... Thank you.
The question that I wanted to ask is, I'm very glad that the PM in India is actually getting onto the campaign of cleaning in India. But if you travel in the train...
I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm so sorry. I missed that.
Hello.
Yes.
My question is to the reply in connection with the cleaning of in India program. But do you not think that the government itself needs to do a bit more? Because if you travel in the trains, the toilets go right down into the train track and have more bins. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Another question here.
I was wondering what your thoughts on the democratization movements happening in Hong Kong right now are.
Okay, and there's time for one more if anybody wants to come forward. Okay, the floor is yours again.
The government cannot pass the buck on to the people when it comes to conservancy. But since we are in October 2, I must say that it is impossible for streets, toilets, bus depots, railway stations to be maintained clean and kept to the best standards by those in charge unless the users cooperate. And I must say that there are some wonderful examples. My wife goes very regularly on a beach walk in our city of Chennai. And there is a group of students that cleans up the beach once a week, brilliantly. The sand comes back to life. But give it a weekend, and we have covered the sand with every conceivable garbage. Now, the beach has its paid sanitary workers, many of them women. Because strangely again, even today when many men do the kind of physical jobs which only women used to do in the past, more men are now working at home than they used to in the past. More men wash vessels, for instance. But you will find very few men bend down and clean the front yard themselves. There is something very humiliating to a man's ego if he is seen with a broom cleaning his doorstep. He might clean the floor inside, but will he come out? No. He will send the wife out to clean. So many of the sanitary workers are women because they are the ones who ask for those jobs. And I feel very personally, I feel like touching their feet because they are really like goddesses. Because they are doing this cleaning up of the rubbish which I have sent on, and they're doing it for a pittance. So when you say the government, please remember that the government means the administration, which means the municipality, which means the department for scavenging, which means these women. Now, if they are to do this work as they should be able to do, they have to do it with the cooperation of the people. Otherwise, we do not have the sanitation rights to comment on them. That, I think, covers the set of questions. Was there one left out? I believe not. Oh, there's a new question?
The Hong Kong, the issue.
The Hong Kong question. Oh, yes, of course. So you know how important memory is to a 69-year-old. It would be very tempting for an Indian to make a sweeping comment about the People's Republic of China. I, as a visitor, should follow the courtesy of international relations and not run a great neighbor down, especially in a third country. But this I will say, that what is happening in Hong Kong and what is probably going to happen much earlier and is scheduled to happen in Catalonia is part of the world's requirement for exercising a choice, for being given the right to choose. And you may be surprised. It may well happen that if given the choice, Hong Kong may choose to stay with China. It may well happen. This has happened in India in a very small way. Goa, which was once a Portuguese dependency, wanted to be a separate state. But when it came to the elections after it had become a separate state, it voted into office the party that did not want a separate state, the Maharashtra Gomantak Party. So we are in a world where choice is important, where people want to choose, whether they choose one way or the other, whether it's in Catalonia, Scotland, or Hong Kong. One final question. I can't find
the brick bank.
The brick
bank. It's a new development bank.
In Scotland?
No, the brick.
The South Africa, India, Brazil. Well, this is in many ways an extension of the question asked about South Africa and Latin America. I think that is something which was quite inevitable. The collaboration between Brazil, India, South Africa, and then wonderful collaboration with China in that is something which we must celebrate and hope for the success of. But I would add this caveat that all groupings tend to be groupings of the dominant class in every country. Now, the dominant class need not represent the numerical majority of the people. So when we have collaborations between India, Brazil, South Africa, and China, we must know that development, that collaboration has really to be for the generality of the people of these countries and not just for the class which was famously once described as the class which has moved from handcuffs to cufflinks.
It's now a great pleasure and honour to propose a short vote of thanks. That was a truly wonderful lecture. We started with two songs, Lead Kindly Light and the Happy Clap song. It was really a thoughtful, limpid, and taking the song theme, very, very lyrical speech, very powerful images of Mahatma, the martyr of peace. I thought so you conjured the historical context with quite inspirational words. A lot of the humour was extremely subtle, and some of it was slapdash, and both types of humour are always very welcome. I thought the emphasis on India as a place with leadership in science, research and innovation, very important, very intelligible to us in the University of Edinburgh. As I said, for us, Bose, a very important physicist, I visited the place where Raman did the spectroscopy that led to his Nobel Prize, and our relationship with Indian biologists, Indian physicists here is extremely strong. You dealt with the big issues of humanity and progress. I found the transport metaphors very charming. You're in a city which lives transport metaphors through the trams, which can be used for pretty much any political rhetorical purpose. But your account of the threatened pedestrian in Delhi was very, very, very good. And you talked about the powerful dichotomies that are affecting the world's largest democracy. And I think that these tensions are very important. In Scotland, we have tremendous pride that we have been through a referendum which aroused tremendous emotions without anything resembling bloodshed. And I think it is, has to be an aspirational feature for democracy, for the strongest forces to be, emotional forces to be unleashed, but for them not to become physical. And I thought the way you addressed that important point and some of the really terrible tensions that India is subject to at the moment, that was really very good. I think the emphasis, and I think this is a political emphasis but also an academic emphasis, the emphasis on partnership on equal terms. I think We have to see that between countries, and likewise we have to see that between Scottish universities and Indian universities. Partnership always on equal terms. And I thought it was an absolutely superbly crafted lecture. We started with 2 songs, and of course we finished with Yesterday All My Troubles Seem So Far Away. I mean, as an amateur speech maker myself, I really admire watching a true professional speech maker. So please join me in thanking Mr. Gandhi again.